All right, welcome back everyone to the Transcending Neurodiversity podcast. Today we have a guest that I'm very grateful to have. His name is Marc Widowson. He has a PhD in history, an MA in physics. He's the author of An Introduction to Theoretical History. And while he doesn't have a specific background in neurodiversity, I did feel compelled to bring him on as I just find him to be someone who thinks for themselves, is very self-educated, and is just a free thinker. And I'm really compelled by his channel, The Dark Age Theorist. And I think his ideas really help a neurodivergence person navigate this complex world. So, Marc, thank you so much for being with us. Can you,
You're
yes,
welcome.
yes, can you explain for a second what theoretical history is?
Yeah, well, theoretical history is trying to understand patterns in history and then apply them to helping to understand what's going on today. So and it's something that's a growing discipline as well, I would say, that probably in the last 20 years, and there's particularly Peter Turchin, who I think many people may have heard of, who's one of the guys driving this, developing um, often mathematical models of, historical patterns. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. They're just trying to understand the patterns of history, like, for example, the rise and fall of empires and what that means for, what our own civilization might be going through. Um, and there's a guy, Northcote Parkinson, who's writing in the 60s, said few people realize that history is just as important as organic chemistry, by which he meant that understanding the patterns of history is really important if you want to understand our world. It's not just stories about the past, it's really trying to understand how societies work and how they progress and evolve and develop.
Yes, awesome. And then I guess, what is the link between history and physics, if you found any?
Well, it's because it's taking the mathematical approach of physics to history and trying to express history with the same kind of precision that we do in physics. And I guess it's just that when I left finished my physics degree, well, I think probably a lot of people who are working in theoretical history are probably inspired by Isaac Asimov and his Foundation trilogy, where he envisaged the idea of the psychohistorical equations, he called it. So the equations describing the evolution of societies, and then using those to shape the future. So if you understand how history works, you can, alter it. That's the idea. So I suppose I was probably inspired by that, but not necessarily with even realizing it, but that probably was an inspiration. And it's just that more and more through my career, I've managed to get into doing that kind of thing, applying the formal scientific methods to history. But so physics training gives you kind of background in the mathematical approach to life. Yeah. So that's that.
Awesome. Yeah, and when I look at your channel, I see some content on this concept of the fourth turning, which I'm familiar with, and I feel very intrigued by, and I think this is one of those, yeah, those theoretical history, mathematical concepts that can really teach us a lot. So could you explain this concept of a fourth turning and why, yeah, just maybe a little bit of context into it?
Yeah, I mean it's from the two people, Strauss and Howe. And they wrote a book, The Fourth Turning, and they wrote the book in the 90s. And so they said we were about to go into the fourth turning. And what I was interested in was trying to present their model formally. So to a lot of people, their idea of well, okay, sorry, I should explain what the fourth turning is then. The idea is that there are four generation archetypes that certainly in the Western world we go through. And each generation lasts about 20 odd years. And so, we've heard of things like the millennial generation, the boomer generation, Generation X. So these are different generation archetypes, and that cycle repeats. And what I wanted to do was to see if we could formalize that myself, because to a lot of people it's kind of like horoscopes, because, for example, the millennial generation, they say, are a hero generation, and a hero generation, they're very intense, they're very conformist and collectivist, things like this. And so it seems like your horoscope, if you're uh, a Taurus, you're very interested in the sensual side of life or something like that. So it seems to be horoscope type mumbo jumbo. I wanted to see if we could kind of formalize that. And so I developed a model, and that's why I made that video. But also because a lot of people talk about the fourth turning, because that's what Strauss and Howe talked about, but they talked about it 20 years ago. We're kind of been living through that fourth turning, and we're still maybe in the grip of it. But what comes next is the first turning. And so, I wanted to make a video to update Strauss and Howe to say what's coming next. It's the first turning. The fourth turning is the crisis, and the first turning is like the calm after the storm. So it's we should be moving back towards a calmer world. That's their theory. Um, and I should say, I don't necessarily believe these things, but I just like to see where we can go with it. Let's just say Strauss and Howe are right. Then what follows from that? And does that help us think about things? Does it help us understand them? That's all. So I'm not necessarily an advocate for their theory, but it's a pretty interesting theory, I think. Seems to work. But then some people might say, well, it's only like retrofitted to the past, history of the generations. And so we have yet to see. If the first turning comes, then we can give a thumbs up to Strauss and Howe. But if things get worse, it doesn't look like their theory is working.
Yeah. And so, say their theory is true, what is the crisis we're going through right now? How do you characterize it?
Well, um, it's there's been like an economic crisis. I think people have not felt that uh, we've been making progress. Like, for example, in the 1950s, 60s, very optimistic time. Life seemed to be getting better. But today, people have got more a feeling of things aren't really getting better. Maybe they're living worse than their parents did. And also a kind of a political strife as well going on. But really, the kind of crisis that Strauss and Howe predict hasn't really materialized. I mean, it would typically be a war and an economic depression. Well, we've kind of maybe had a milder version of that. Um,
Hmm. Yeah. And if you could simplify this crisis, or maybe just, some people say, oh, it's because of technology, or it's because of politics, or it's because of the human ego. I guess if you could just simplify this, if you will, what do you think to you is the core issue at hand today?
um, in characterizing our crisis as such, I think it's political polarization, and um, yeah, so I think there's quite a lot of stress and negativity in the world. Um, that and as I say, political polarization, and division, and that's a temporary thing, and it's ending. I think quite a few people feel that that's kind of ending, and people are getting fed up with too much strife and political polarization, and we're moving back to maybe a bit more seeing the other kind of people's points of view and things.
hmm And so,
I don't know how do you feel about that? I mean, what's your diagnosis?
oh, yeah, it's a mix of things, but to me, what's really apparent is just man's relationship to technology and how it's just kind of we're just kind of it's not us having technology anymore, it's technology having us and just
Yeah,
extracting from us to the maximum. And part of and the political polarization to me is kind of like a manifestation of that, where the more polarized we are, the more online we are. You know, it's all just to empower these social media companies.
yes.
So to me, that's really a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of that in there. Is there anything in
So
man
there's the
relation?
echo chamber,
Go on.
the echo chamber kind of effect that
Yes.
you then consume content that makes you angry.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess on the relationship on the relationship that man has to technology, is there anything in there from like a historical lens that you know, feel applies here? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, people have always had issues with technology, new technologies. I mean, it's always socially disruptive. As you know, I mean, in the Industrial Revolution, people, destroyed machines which were taking their jobs, and they were taking their jobs because they were taking over the manual labor, and that's what a lot of people used to do. But um, we, in the long run, you would see that, yeah, you did lose your jobs, but you found new jobs. So, that would be the optimistic takeaway.
hmm
That the technology that we're experiencing disruption through technology, but it's kind of always a way. But it's not the end of the world necessarily.
Okay. Tell
Mm.
me more that you don't think it's the end of the world. I mean, overall, like I guess this is a separate question to ask if you're an optimist. But yeah, tell me more. You don't think it's the end of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I am an optimist for the human race. It's sometimes very difficult to be, but looking back from perspective of thousands of years, the human story has had a lot of atrocities, a lot of problems and things, but overall, there's been some kind of progress. And if we think we're living through bad times today, well, try going back to, just say the wars of the last century. I mean, we were, here we were at one time dropping bombs on Germany, and they were dropping bombs on us. And if you went back to the beginning of the 20th century and the First World War, a lot of people felt civilization was ending then. But it's never permanent, and you get through these things. That's would be my takeaway from history, and feel that humans have always managed to overcome these difficulties. um but that's just a statement of faith, really. I want It's not something you can prove mathematically. I know a lot of people feel that we're kind of living through the end.
Mm, yeah. No, I think on a societal, cultural, just like human level, I could definitely see that. Even just us having this conversation and me having a YouTube channel on mental health that, people can see from all over the world. I mean, I think that kind of sums it up. We have access to really positive resources and yeah, it's like a sign of progress to me. But I think the one thing that I guess when it comes to the outlook on the future, even if society fixes itself on a human level, the earth and climate change tends to be like another sort of aspect of this. And this is actually, I see a lot of people in my generation having a lot of stress about climate change and just like how long are we even gonna have the earth? And I saw you made an interesting video, or yeah, you're talking about climate change and I guess like an alternative perspective on it. And I kind of want to just pick your brain about that. Where do you see, yeah, the climate change aspect of this?
um well, on the climate change, you see, that's part of the mood that we're in. But moods change, and when you're in a mood, it's very difficult to imagine what it's like to be outside that mood. It's like when you've got a head cold, when you've got the flu or something, the cold. You can't really imagine what it's like to feel well, and when you're well, you can't really remember what it's like to feel sick. So, I think that we're in that kind of mood about climate change and everything's terrible, but it is a mood I think that we're going through. Um, on in terms of climate change, just again as a theoretical historian, I'm not convinced that uh, humans can't overcome this, or that the planet can't overcome this, because as we know, the climate has changed massively in the past, and the Earth has carried on. Human societies are very resilient. Life is very resilient, um, and also, in fact, it's global warming has traditionally been seen as an improvement in the climate. It's getting colder. That's what you should really be afraid of. So again, I find it very difficult to see warming as a problem. But also, and then another thing beyond that is, and I know, some people will think I'm going to very wacky here, but I do believe that humans will or should become a space-going civilization. I mean, I read something today that the Chinese are saying they've got a planned a manned moon mission by 2030. They want to be mining helium by 2035. um, Humans have always imagined these things like flying through the air, talking at distances, and these things have come to pass eventually through, you know, technological innovation. So I don't really see any reason from looking at history why we shouldn't be able to become a space-going civilization. And once we're a space-going civilization, Earth is just one part of the game. When we think of ourselves as a terrestrial species, we think of the Earth as our home, but one day we'll think of ourselves as a solar system species, and the solar system is our home. And so something like global warming, is going to reduce in importance then when we're zipping around from planet to planet. Um, yeah, so I don't see it as like the end that it is painted. And
Hmm.
and I think it's perhaps sad that well, also, do you not see recently like news like Bill Gates has started changing his view
On,
on climate change? He
oh,
says
really?
yeah, Bill Gates, very recently in the last week or two, he said very much what I'm just saying, that humans, he doesn't believe that society will collapse because of climate change. I mean, he's saying, I've come to change my view on that. So I think there's a shift happening,
Wow.
hopefully. Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm definitely going to look into that.
Yeah.
And so why should humans go to other planets? Like, I guess what would the reasoning be?
Um, well, because it's the human spirit. I mean, we're, explorers, and we want to understand the world. And I would also say um, there's this tendency to see humans as like intruders in the earth. We're the problem. We're disrupting the ecosystems and things like that. But humans didn't arrive on this earth from somewhere else. Humans are a product of this earth. We are a product of the biosphere. We are the biosphere's creation. And if you look at life, uh, it is always pushing out. If you have a patch of bare soil, it will soon be colonized by plants, and it goes through the ecological succession. You get the first colonizers, and then other plants come along. And then the trees eventually grow. Life is always exploiting opportunities. And one of the things life wants to do is always move into new environments to keep itself going and to multiply. And humans are the way, I would say, that the biosphere is doing that, because the biosphere has given rise to humans so that it can spread life further through the cosmos. Because look, this cosmos is a huge, vast place. And what a shame it would be for humans to remain forever cooped up on this one tiny planet. There's a whole vast universe out there to explore and to expand our minds and things to discover, things that we can't even imagine now. And, answers maybe to many of our problems lie out there. So, but it's not, there's maybe not a logical reason for it, but it's just an impulse, I would say, that humans have to like the guy who climbed Mount Everest, I think, has famously said, they said, "Why did you climb Mount Everest?" And he said, "Because it was there." And so that's why we will conquer space, because it's there. Um, you know, there's no more better reason than that.
Hmm. I love the optimism. I really do. It's not something I come by very often, but it's really refreshing to hear this perspective. And I kind of want to tie this into neurodiversity a bit because right
Yes.
now,
Uh,
yeah. So right now, so yeah, with the harsh economy right now for neurodivergence, it seems like there's so much pressure to fit into these boxes. And yeah, neurodivergents are having a very interesting time. It's a very interesting time for us right now. And it's almost like we are the different thinkers, the ones who can come up with those new ideas, like an Einstein
mm.
or a Tesla. Um, but at the same time, with such economic pressures, and with this mental health crisis as well, there is just at the same, there's so much opportunity to explore our creativity with the age of the internet, and then also so much burdening. And I'm wondering, from this perspective of the fourth turning and maybe things lightening up and getting better soon, what is your perspective on this sort of archetype or this sort of population? The artists maybe, yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, the video that you suggested I look at, I think uh, well, something on there struck me that it was something very similar that I thought about 10 years ago now. I was out for a walk and I don't know why I kind of got onto this train of thought, but I was thinking about my friends. And I went through all my friends and I thought, I don't have any friends who are really normal. Everybody has kind of issues of one kind or another. And so I think that would be like what you would say is neurodiversity. I was thinking that all of them, struggle in some ways with kind of social issues and things. And I'm not trying to say that my friends are all a bunch of weirdos or anything. I just think that, I try to think through of all the people I know, who would I really say is normal? And I thought, actually, there isn't really anyone I could really say is normal. And I think that's one thing that your guest or you were getting at, that, you know, it's kind of not that there's like a population of normals and then a population of neurodivergence. There's kind of uh, everybody's got some kind of level of neurodivergence. And I remember a French humorist again I saw. He said that in the US, people say the US consists of 200 million people, or whatever it was, probably 300 million today. The US consists of 300 million people. But in France, we say France is divided into 50 million people, whatever. In other words, that it's each Frenchman is different, right? It's divided into 50 million Frenchmen. For all you can't talk about Frenchmen, everybody's different. And I think we feel that here in England as well. English eccentricity is something that we sort of pride ourselves on, that people are kind of all different. So I I think that I kind of agreed with that perspective that neurodiversity is something relevant to everybody, right? It's
Hmm.
everybody is kind of to some extent, everybody is kind of themselves unique. Um, and as for then what these fourth turning things mean, well, there is that aspect of what you say, if it's going to become more optimistic, calmer, um, hopefully, people who struggle will find the world a bit more welcoming, more optimistic, improve their mood, because the mood has been very negative for 20 years, according to the Strauss-Howe theory. And I think that's what you're saying you perceive as well. So an improvement in mood is on the horizon. But, the other thing that I've been thinking about, though, is much longer term, uh, so that we um, we're moving into a world where governments are much more intrusive, um, technocratic, controlling governments, and I think this is going to be a problem for neurodivergent people. It's going to emphasize conformism, fitting into your position in society. Um, I feel that so if it depends what time horizon you're looking at. If you're looking at on the short time horizon, yeah, maybe we're going into kind of an improved mood, but it will only be for another generation and things will turn back again. But on the longer time horizon, I think there's more trouble coming up, because these technologies that have been very freeing to people over the last 20 years, I think you can see that they're now being turned back against people, used by governments, things like social credit scoring and the surveillance. The internet is becoming less free, and the Chinese social credit is kind of a model that Western governments are looking at with some envy, I think, because it's seen as a good way of controlling populations. And so um, this, this is going to present a problem for people with an independent turn of mind. Does that resonate at all? Or do you disagree with where I'm
Oh,
going with that?
I resonate and I want to hear more because this is a completely new idea or just like a
Okay,
new concept that people don't talk about.
right. Well, I mean, it gets a bit kooky here, but um, I started firstly thinking along these lines when I was doing some of my conventional, like theoretical history work, looking at how going back thousands of years, um, the world has gone through periods of stagnation. So there are periods of great progress and improvement and optimism, and then periods of freedom. And then there are other periods that where the world hasn't really changed, it's stagnated. For example, the Roman Empire was such a time. The Roman Empire was very powerful, and during that time, there was very little real innovation and very little sort of technological innovation and also social innovation. Governments are very powerful, populations are very controlled. Then it collapsed. And that was a time of great freedom because governments became weak and the individuals had more opportunity to think differently. And so it became a time of great creativity. And that's a dark age. Uh, uh, it's dark because a lot of things originate then. And there's no real record of what happened because it's a time of fluidity. And, that's obviously related to the whole concept of my YouTube channel. That's why I called it Dark Age theorist, Dark Ages. It was what I'd studied in my PhD, the Dark Age. But thinking about it as a general phenomenon, as a time of creativity. And so what I kind of came to see was that actually we've been through this period of creativity, and we're now coming towards the stagnation phase. And the biggest, clearest sign of that is the flattening off of the world population growth. Because when there's new innovations coming in, new ideas, population grows strongly. And when there's a stagnant time in world history, then there's few new technologies. It means we're not finding better ways to feed and support a bigger population. So we're kind of plateauing. And that's what we seem to be doing now. So, and the point about this, the kind of frightening aspect is these periods last for 1,000 years, if not 2,000 years. And so that would seem to be what we're looking for the next 1,000 years, is a period of kind of social stagnation, quite controlling, powerful governments. The power has shifted from the individual to the government. Um, but then more recently, I started to look into astrological ideas and the age of Aquarius, which is what we're supposedly moving into. We've been in the age of Pisces, we're moving into the age of Aquarius. And when I was growing up, the age of Aquarius was kind of a wonderful, happy, hippie sort of time. But then when I started to look into the age of Aquarius more recently, I realized it's actually describing a world that is is like I've just suggested, a quite a stagnant and controlled world. But the optimistic side of it, and for optimistic for neurodivergent people, is that Aquarius in astrological terms is known as the maverick. And of course, the neurodivergent people are the mavericks. So Aquarius is kind of a schizophrenic kind of sign and a schizophrenic kind of age, that there will be a lot of emphasis on conformism to ideology, a lot of control by governments, but there'll be an undercurrent, an underground of individual thinking and individual minds. And so what we're looking at is a time when the neurodivergent people are going to be the people who keep alive the human spirit. I think that is what we're looking at. There's going to be these controlling societies, conformist societies demanding conformity, what you were saying about being in your little box. But the age of Aquarius also favors the individual mind. But it's going to be a tough time, but they're going to be the people who keep the human spirit really alive underground, I think. So yeah, we want to encourage our neurodivergent population,
Wow.
the maverick minds.
This is phenomenal. This is really speaking my language. I really love it. Um, yeah, what made me curious, so yeah, you said plateau, era of plateau, and you said sort of like populations plateauing. And I'm wondering too, like, is this a plateauing of expression? And what came to mind was almost like AI, kind of like this, I guess, making everything just simplify, AI doing everything for us, AI slop, no new
Yeah.
content. Is this sort of what you're alluding to?
Well, it is. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective, but I think you've got a good point there. AI could well be part of the thing that if we were, encouraging people to rely on AI helps that conformity, doesn't it? Because we'll all just go with the AI and stop thinking for ourselves. So again, it's going to be the neurodivergent people who resist that, who don't get on with that, who are always fighting against the conformity, who are going to stop the human race as a whole becoming just mindless, hive mind. I think you used the term earlier. Yeah, we're going to live in a period where the hive mind is going to be very strong. And I think you're right. The AI is part of helping foster that hive mind. So
Mhm.
AI is a useful tool, but we don't want to become its servants. No.
Mhm. So what I want to hear more of now is how does one survive sort of this plateauing or yeah, this sort of I forgot what word you used, but yeah, this sort of
The
plateauing period.
stagnation or plateauing.
Yeah, how do humans work through that usually? Or I guess from a historical lens, what advice would you give to people in a neurodivergence position or just, like not neurodivergence?
I think it is to be content with yourself. Uh, you know, it's it's not by joining with other people. It's not, because that is precisely what you're trying to avoid. The age of Aquarius, and I should say about the astrology, obviously a lot of people are going to have a problem with astrology as like again mumbo jumbo, but I think what I see it as it provides a tool for thinking about these things. We don't necessarily have to believe in cosmic influences or anything, but there's a vocabulary there. There's a, a, um, a, s- a set of ideas that we can use. So yeah, so this age of Aquarius, if you want to call it that, or this age of stagnation, is going always to try and draw people into groups and is enforce conformity to the groups. And so you can't be drawn into those things. You're going to have just to think for yourselves, but it's a very lonely thing. You can connect with people, but you're not going to find anybody who's exactly on your wavelength. But you mustn't, or you mustn't try to um, fit in with the conformity because it's easy. It's going to be those people who are content with themselves. All the world may say the way you're thinking is wrong, the way you're doing things is wrong. So it is going to be lonely. But if those neurodivergent people don't keep true to themselves, then the human spirit really will die out and be crushed, and we will really be turned into the hive mind. Am I making myself clear? I'm not really expressing it very well, am I? But
Oh,
what I'm trying to say is, it's there's no easy way. There's no group that you can join. It's just believe in yourself. That's all.
absolutely. No, and yeah, you're speaking my language. This is perfect. And how I kind of see it is sometimes it's almost like there's a carrot dangled in front of us, and it's like, okay, come here and you can have your carrots, but then, and you'll have, these material opportunities. You'll get social acceptance. Life will be easy. Life will be smooth. You'll be in the system with us. But then on the other hand, yeah, it's like a compromise, you know? And it's almost like you're always tempted to conform. They're always tempting you to conform, whether it's with social media and I mean, this is just like a more of like an abstract topic. Like you see this in different forms of histories, like conform, get these material opportunities, get the social validation, get the security, but then on the other hand, you just have to compromise your own sort of belief system or your own authenticity in a way. And I mean, I think nowadays that's clearly, yeah, I'm just seeing that play out in different ways. And it makes sense when you mention also like the technocratic governments, how this is just going to get more and more institutionalized, right? Um, so that's really interesting to think about. And my
Yeah,
mind's
because
still a bit on the yeah, go for it. On the
well, I was
my
just going
mind
to
was
say
still
about
on the technocratic government, but yeah, I want to hear what you said.
I was just going to emphasize what you're saying that it's about the the temptation to conform. You're saying the carrot. Um, it's with the um, social credit scores. You know what I'm talking about in China, the social credit score. If you don't believe the correct things about global warming, or if you associate with certain people who are disapproved, if you visit certain websites that are disapproved, your social credit score goes down. And that reduces your access to, you can't travel on the train and things like that. So it's not just like a incidental thing. If social credit scores are introduced so that on your phone you're told your social credit score is now 72%, and because you talk to Marc Widdowson, who's a bit of a global warming denier or something, your social credit score's gone down, then that incentivizes you to conform, because when your it's not just they disapprove of you, but you won't be able to uh, do things you want to do. You won't be able to travel, that kind of thing. So, and this social credit score is happening. It's already in China. They want to bring it here. They want to bring it to the Western countries, don't they?
Hmm.
Are you aware of that? Any?
Not fully.
I
I mean,
don't. Am I being too alarmist?
what are the signs that it's coming to Western countries?
Well, here in the UK, they're going talking about introducing digital ID.
Mm.
Digital ID means that all aspects of your life, your bank accounts, your employment, uh, your health records, everything will all be centralized into one digital ID. And of course, that is the it allows you then to control people, because you now can maybe stop payments into their bank account, stop them accessing health services, things like that, all centralized. So um, it's not necessarily overt, but I think if you search for social credit and in the West, you'll see that there's talk of how advantageous it could be. Um, and yeah, I think that I see the digital ID that they're trying to introduce in the UK as um, a beginning of moving in that direction.
And so is all this happening because of technology and because just it's like a byproduct of technology that we're getting more technocratic? Or is it almost like a wave of like controllingness, an institutional power from like a historical lens? Like which one is it?
Um, well, I don't think it's to do with technology per se, because again, as a theoretical historian, one trend you see is that technologies always come in and are quite freeing, liberating, and shift power to the individual when they first come in. And then the governments claw back that power. So, to give an example, the invention of printing in the 15th century, 1450 or so, Gutenberg in Germany invented the printing press, and uh, that initially empowered ordinary people, because in the past you had to rely on monks writing everything out by hand, and books were very expensive and they were controlled by the church. But once a secular businessman invented the printing press, you could churn out books and you could challenge the authority of the church. And people say that the printing press helped the Reformation, Martin Luther, um, because he used the printing press to disseminate his uh, treatises against the church, and so led to the Protestant uh, revolution against the Catholic Church. So the printing press put power into the hands of ordinary people. But eventually, the governments regained control with censorship rules, for example. And they started to use the printing press now for mass control of their population. So with forms and documentation and things like that. So yeah, we've seen. I think go through this cycle with the internet. When the internet came in 20 years ago, it was the Wild West. Uh, Google search would come up with thousands, if not millions, of web pages, and they were all real web pages. But now Google search only gives you a few approved results, and it's very difficult to find the kind of stuff that neurodivergent people would be interested in, stuff off the beaten path. You're just fed conventional narratives. You know?
Yeah.
So,
You just have you guys have
so
sorry, you just have an AI just telling you what to think pretty much. Yeah.
yeah. So, but I think that cycle is something that's happened over and over again. I think this stagnation, I'm not quite so sure why, what causes that. But there's obviously some kind of long-term 1,000-year cycle of maybe governments have been getting more and more controlling of over the last few hundred years. Um, a friend introduced me to the ideas of um, a French philosopher, Deleuze. I don't, Gilles Deleuze, I think. Do you know?
I've
And how
definitely
he,
heard of him, yeah.
yeah, and he says how governments in like the 19th, 20th century were disciplinarian, so that if you did wrong, they punished you, you went to prison, whatever. But now they're not disciplinarian, they're controlling. So they kind of control you before you even go down that path. And the social credit score is a big part of that. Um, but Deleuze sees this happening in the West today that, governments they're looking at your emails. I mean, Edward Snowden told us all that, and so they know what's going on, and so they can kind of a nudge. That this I don't know if you've heard that term nudge.
No.
In the UK, they had a nudge unit. It's based on what they call behavioral economics, about how you can influence people by messages, various kinds, which are inserted into media, suggesting that they are um, organic when it's really actually, government messaging, that kind of thing. So, yes, there's these subtle controls that are surrounding us. Um, but yeah, your question was why, at what's causing it? I can only say it's something I'm thinking about myself. I mean, everything. Personally, I feel I'm just learning all the time. I don't have a fixed view of what's going on.
Hmm.
It's a lot of it's very confusing to me too. And I think I know from looking at some of your work and your talks that you question whether reality is really the real reality.
Well, if yeah, I question, if there's more dimensions at play. Yeah, just I guess I'm very skeptical, or I just don't even believe in that materialist worldview
Yeah,
that the world is just made of dead matter. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and I agree. I think there's a lot of things about our world just don't make sense. Um, and I, through my life, always thought that if I just kept researching and reading, I would one day get to the answer. But I think like almost 10 years ago now, I started to think, you're never going to find the answer. You're never really going to understand because these things that don't make sense is is because you're seeing the surface, but there's something deeper. And what we're seeing is like an illusion, you know.
Hmm.
Is
Yeah.
is that is that something you're saying? I mean, you fill me in on that.
Oh yeah, like an illusion, kind of from just like a metaphysical, spiritual perspective. Like, yeah, I guess technically, like you can say like nothing exists or everything is just a hologram or yeah, I mean, there's that way of seeing it, but then there's also like the illusion the of what we're shown, what we're told. You know, if we're gonna talk more on the on like a political and economic level, there's like what they show you, and then what goes on in the background. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but
Well,
yeah,
that, both those
both are,
things.
it's important to understand both in my eyes, and they
Mm.
both really play into each other in a weird way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to the view, or that consciousness is a very important and fundamental force. The materialist worldview is that consciousness is just like an illusion in itself. It's just something created out of matter. And I think someone like yourself is on the same wavelength as myself, that consciousness is actually some kind of fundamental force of nature and has a much more important role in the world. And then neurodivergent people are probably more conscious. The normal person, if there is such a thing, is just happy. They're not thinking, they're not analyzing, they're not thinking about the world. It's a comfortable place to be, but it's an unconscious kind of life.
Mm,
Um, it the Erwin Schrödinger, the guy behind Schrödinger's cat, wrote about this. How he talked about how you can you can do things like drive to work that you do every day, and you can get to work and you just can't even remember what you were doing. It's just automatic. And maybe like the normal life is the automatic kind of life. You don't need to think. You just go along the rut. But the problem that neurodivergent people have is they're not able to do that. They have to think about things. They see things that other people aren't even aware of. And this is problematic because, you're thinking, what, why don't other people see what I'm seeing?
absolutely, yeah.
So,
Um,
I think being conscious is, yeah, likely to lead to being neurodivergent.
mhm. Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's important for people to understand consciousness, to think about consciousness, because the materialist worldview definitely doesn't hold that up. And then another thing that kind of also goes against the materialist worldview that we're fed, which I believe is just kind of destructive or just not good for my mental health, let's just say. Um, is also, yeah, this concept of like holism versus sort of like entropy, where like we're kind of taught that like everything is just an entropy. Everything is just kind of getting destroyed, and we need, and it kind of supports this notion that governments need to hold everything together because nature and society and humans are so inherently broken, which is actually funny because, I was diagnosed with a disorder, right? It's like this is just the way that the scientific paradigm sort of labels people and things. Um, but there's another way of seeing it, which is that actually, when you kind of zoom out, everything strives towards holism, everything strives towards order. And you can very much see it in that way as well. And so it's interesting how that this concept of holism I had to find by myself. It was not taught to me in school.
Mm.
And so it's almost like there's a philosophical warfare going on. And this is actually, yeah, I'm kind of where are we going with this? But I mean, it's like, yeah, there is almost sort of like a philosophical war at play that ties into this. And it's like it's really from those zoomed out perspective, like what is your presumption about the world and how the world works and how humans work? You know, that also really guides the decision making process. Is that, yeah. There's
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that indeed makes sense. Our materialist worldview, and science does this, is um, to compartmentalize things and not to see the connections between things. This one thing I'd say that theoretical history is good for anybody who's really interested in connections and who's interested in everything, because everything is within the ambit of theoretical history. Because if you're looking back through history, everything that people do, art, science, religion, economics, language, it's all part of human behavior, and therefore it's something that you want to understand as a historian. But anyway, our science, yeah, it's I feel that one of the worst doctrines of modern science is that everything is just one thing. So it's either true or it's false. And so it's either this or it's that. And um, I just don't think that that is kind of necessarily the case. Um, I mean, one example of it is, well, this may be a silly example, but I hope it kind of illustrates the point I'm making, is that some people produced a photograph of a ghost in a hotel. I think it was. It was like ghostly children in a hotel. And somebody debunked it by showing that this was actually just a fire extinguisher that was down this corridor of the hotel. But that to me shows that kind of scientific view of it's either this or it's that. It's either a fire extinguisher or it's a ghost. If you've proven that it's a fire extinguisher, you've proven that it's not a ghost. But um, but how do we know that ghosts don't manifest themselves by giving a kind of creepy ambiance to a fire extinguisher? So maybe it can be a ghost and a fire extinguisher. Yeah, because so the person who took that photo, they were creeped out by that fire extinguisher. And so maybe there was something going on that's more than a fire extinguisher. But for science, you can't have that. It's either this or it's that. And a lot of the dialogue that goes on is like in science, proving that it's that, proving that it's that, and therefore it's not this. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that is very antithetical to the holistic kind of view that you're talking about, because it isn't just this or that. It's actually all of these things all at the same time, and they're all kind of related.
Hmm. Yeah, it's that hyper skeptical, reductionist, highly empirical way of thinking where everything just needs to be boxed and characterized and can't be sure if this is true until we really isolate the variable and all this stuff. And yeah, it's and it's valuable. Like that approach is definitely valuable in some aspects, but in terms of actually like helping humans out and understanding human beings, yeah, yeah, it makes it definitely yeah, there's so much nuance to the human experience. And yeah, empiricism in and of itself is very limiting because there's also more than five senses. Like we know this, and I think a lot of what we understand empiricism to be is just focusing on what the five senses can observe. And again, it's almost like this kind of leads to people, yeah, just denying people's worldviews and saying, oh, if you can't observe it with your five senses, it must not exist. So just listen to what the academics have to say about it. And this is what's interesting about neurodiversity is I find neurodivergents have a very strong intuition or might have, extrasensory capability, like yeah, just are very attuned to these other senses.
Mm.
And in order to navigate this modern world, yeah, you really need to be strong in your own experience and what you're experiencing. I know science really tries to control for subjectivity, which is obviously a good thing. But then on the other, but it's not black and white, just because it's subjective doesn't mean it can't be true, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we know that a lot of science is not really as objective as it's supposed to be. Um, a lot of bias gets into people's thinking, and they see what they expect to see. What you're saying about how they isolate things, they then do violence to what is really going on. Um, so, I don't think we need to feel that science is successful in what it is doing because it isn't. It isn't providing the answers. I mean, you look at something like fundamental cosmology, they're in a complete mess. None of it makes sense anymore. They thought they were getting somewhere, but I mean, I don't know if you follow the um, Sabine Hossenfelder YouTuber,
The
YouTuber,
YouTuber.
Sabine Hossenfelder.
Yeah, tell me more.
She's she's she she comments all the time about the state of particle physics and how it's become meaningless. Um, so science is failing because it's not doing the things you're talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, I
It's
mean there
it's
are, yeah.
it's yeah,
Oh, I was gonna say just like, to address the nuance a little bit. I mean, science has been very successful, I think, in producing new technologies and just medications. And then what else has it been good at? There's like a third one that it's been successful in. Because I think those industries have definitely gotten a
yeah.
raise. But I think in terms of just human overall wellness, I think science, might be creating more of a detriment. But go on.
Yeah. I mean, we could perhaps distinguish between science and technology. Um, so technology is often adduced as an example of the success of science, but is not actually necessarily a legitimate example of its success because it's actually quite an empirical thing, finding things that work, where science is about trying to explain and understand. But there is obviously, yeah, I agree, there's an overlap between them. But even if you look in healthcare, yeah, there is some successes, but there's still a lot of things that, health can't do. I mean, uh, uh, cancer, for example, you know, it's improved, but there's still no cure for it. Um, and maybe it's because they're looking at it in the wrong way.
Hmm. Yeah.
You said you were diagnosed, and that is a kind of way of controlling you. Would you see it as?
Well, I think it's I don't want to blame anyone. I think it's like yeah, I don't think it's not well-meaning necessarily. Like I don't
Yeah,
think it's like a mechanism of control.
right.
It's just this label that got slapped on me when I was like three
Yeah.
years old. And like I
Okay.
learned about it when I was 10. And again, like, I don't want to blame the scientists who are studying this or anything. I mean, there's always like I think something more fundamental there. But I think, yeah, that label was really kind of limiting for me. Just being told that you're a disordered human being because you're not socializing and thinking in a normal
Right.
way. I think that's a manifestation of a lot of what we talked about today. Yeah,
Can I just ask? Do you is your approach to want to own that label, or to reject that label,
to
or
transcend it,
something else?
to transcend it.
Transcend it.
So
Yeah.
that doesn't mean to reject it, nor does it mean to identify with it.
Right.
It's to just see it for what it is. It used to have a lot more of a hold on me. I used to either suppress it, but the suppression was almost like a reflection of how much I secretly identified with it. Now it's just
Right.
it's transcending it and kind of seeing it for what it is. Like I do think there is something to autism. There is something to ADHD. Like yeah, it's a category, yeah, but I think it's interesting to explore. But at the same time, yeah, to really put a label on someone and call them disordered, I think that can really mislead someone and create almost this self. self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, since I'm disordered, since I'm this, then I can only do this much with my life, you know?
Mm.
So that's kind of my yeah, it's kind of gets into my path a little bit. Yeah.
But and have you had like help to transcend it, or is that something you've arrived at yourself?
Totally arrived at myself.
Yeah.
Um, I think people have like, there is like neurodivergent accommodations and stuff, and I have very, loving parents who like looked out for me and like siblings, but only to an extent that, is like typically recommended. Um, yeah, it was my own journey with self-development, self-realization, self-actualization, whatever you want to phrase it, so just mixing, Western and Eastern philosophy and spirituality and self-help just to understand myself more. I'm doing a master's in psychology right now. It's just, getting the holistic, seeing the world in that holistic way, understanding myself from all these different angles, understanding the world from all these different angles. I think that's been very liberating. And a lot of it is a lot of this ties into, yeah, like the getting out of that materialist, rigid scientific worldview that is honestly seen as this like, supreme highest knowledge and actually getting more into like instead of trusting everything I've been told and just eating it all up, like just thinking for myself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that's why I'm so compelled by just talking to people like you, um, just people who have arrived to their own well thought out conclusions about the world. Um, yeah, I learned so much more from conversations like this than anything I was taught in school. So yeah,
Yeah, and I'd emphasize, I mean, we're all learning all the time. We never It's never final, so um because I certainly feel that myself. I don't know the answers. But talking, as you say, talking with other people, uh and and trying out your own ideas to see if they work, um is can be useful. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's curiosity, and that's ultimately what like science is to me. It's not just assuming that a set of presumptions are true and just operating from that. It's like, no, let's just question everything, you know? Um, so yeah, it's being in constant state of curiosity and wonder. And this to me, really brings one into presence as well. Um, yeah, it's almost like the more you let go of knowing, the more the world kind of opens up to you. And
Mm.
it's a really beautiful thing. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add or?
No, I think we've probably talked long enough. Um, but yeah, thank you very much for the talk, and yeah, it's interesting to hear a bit about yourself as well. And I'll certainly, take a look at your channel from time to time and look at your uploads to see how you're getting on.
Thank you so much. And yeah, if you have any links you'd like for me to share or any resources for the audience, we can put it in the description below. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really love this conversation. Thank you all for tuning in. Um, like and subscribe, to support me and to support Mark. Your channel is The Dark Age Theorist, which I will link below. Some really interesting content. And yeah. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And yeah, till next episode.
Thank you.